Well, I figured out that you are the first directors of kind of what I call the next generation of directors, because to this point, I've interviewed mostly my contemporaries from the 80s, the old guys.
Ah,
And so you're part of that newer generation that directed early in the 90s. And so congratulations, you're the first. And we'll have
very
Thank
nice. Well,
you.
that's
more.
great. And it's interesting, Jim, you know how Cam is, of course. He called, I was in my apartment. We had been married not long. And I think it was probably the winter of 91. I'm not sure.
It was probably
But
91.
I was working, actually, it was one of the very few times I was working full time for a church.
Yes.
And we weren't super happy there. Well, first of all, we were poor. So,
Well,
but
and it was a small church,
yeah,
Jim, and we were not just doing music ministry, but we
yeah.
were also doing youth ministry.
Right.
Which turns out I'm not so good at. But
Juggling.
in,
But
but
when you look back at it, you see how God used
yeah.
that, to prepare us for Continentals.
Interesting.
Well, so Cam called me and I was excited that he called. I had toured in 1985 and I toured the second half of 87 because I had some college summer classes I had to finish with. So I went with John Eric's Jesus Project the last half. And then I did the Continental Brass in 88 and I toured with Keith Wheeler as an AD in 90 Eastern Europe. And then he called me and he said, "Hey, Cam Floria." And he said, "What are you doing right? What are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm a music minister." And before I finished the sentence, he said, "That's perfect." And and I
Sounds
said,
like Cam.
"Yeah." I said, "What do you have in mind?" He said, "How'd you like to direct Tour C?" And so it was such a cool phone call to get, and that's how that
And
happened.
the
But
timing was perfect because, like Brian said, we were kind of at a place where we were like, oh, we felt like God was
yeah,
going to move us in a different direction, but we just didn't know what were going to do.
yeah.
And then Cam calls, and then we're like, oh, maybe this is what God wants us to do.
Talk a little bit about some of the nuggets that you took away, maybe from Cam, maybe from a director, maybe just experientially.
I picked up a book um, a couple years ago that was the purpose of the book was for a father to write down things that he could leave for his kids. And I started working on this and I thought, the Continentals actually is so important to me. I'm going to leave a video message for them. So I actually recorded like a 4 or 5, 6 minute video explaining to my kids how much that changed me. So I said, being a part of something like that at an early age, it formed so many key parts of my life. The continental discipline, the importance of punctuality, the importance of
Mhm.
quality, the importance of perseverance, the importance of not giving up, the importance of continuing when you're tired, and very importantly, I remember being at rehearsal camp, and I'm sure it was Jim Chafee at the time explaining, teaching us principles of being in the host home. And, I'll never forget, I was 18 years old, and I still remember him saying, when you go into a host home, don't talk about yourself. Ask them about their family. Ask them about their church. What are their needs? Leave the place better than you found it. And
Mhm.
that stuff and it sounds simple, but that was powerful. And to this day, when I meet somebody new, I'm thinking, I'm going to ask them more questions about their
Mhm.
life than I'm not going to talk about myself.
Mhm.
And all these years later, who would think that something that simple,
Hmm.
would be that profound? And it really does impact my work. It impacts relationships at church. It's excellent. I'll let you
Well,
share
I'm
your.
going to echo everything he just said, because all of those things, all of those life skills that we had to learn in a short amount of time, and we're all young, right?
Mhm.
And we're put into all of these different situations that we've never been in before, and we're having to navigate that. We're having to learn how to problem solve, when things go south, for a moment, and then you have to come up with what are we going to do, to fix this, and not giving up. And I think what you said about just being that sounding board, being present,
Mhm.
in people's lives, asking questions, getting to know them and not focusing so much on yourself, I think is a valuable lesson.
Share, if you would, about the one individual we had. God put us in the right host home for that
Yes,
night. This is amazing, I
yes.
think.
So one of our
It's a
crew
summer tour.
members, yeah, wasn't a singer, but he was apparently was struggling with a lot, and we just did not realize until one of the other members of our group came to us and said, "Hey, so and so is
He's
not."
got he's got scars all
He's
over
got
his arm.
scars all over his arm, and he's wearing long sleeve shirts, and it was our summer tour, and
Mm.
it's hot.
Yeah, and he shared that he had been sexually abused for 10 years. So we're young, and I said to this young man, do you need to go home? Is this too much for you? And he said, if I can't finish this tour, if you send me home, I'm going to probably kill myself. And so it's super heavy, and we were somewhere in Texas, and we do the concert. We're married, so we go to the host home and tell them who we were hosted with. It was
Well, we were
unbelievable.
praying about this
Yeah.
because we knew how serious this situation was, and we were like, "What are we supposed to do, God?" And so that night we were placed in a host home. It was two
Yeah.
Christian psychologists,
Husband and the wife.
husband and wife team, and we were able to have that time with them that evening just to share what was going on and be able to get their expert advice. And
We were up very, very late.
we were up very late, and they prayed with us,
Wow.
gave us some things that we could implement with him, and we did, and it did work.
Yeah,
It
he
made a
did.
huge impact.
And you know what? Today, he's successful. He's been involved in ministry. It's beautiful,
Wow.
But I mean, God, when that stuff happens, you just I just I'm so grateful, because we were just young. We were trying to understand how to help him, and then we end up with the exact couple that we needed to be with.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And I feel like, Continentals has been such a safe haven for so many
mhm.
people through the years. And like I said, you don't know, what people are going through. You don't know what kind of home life,
Mhm.
some of these young people were being
Yeah.
brought up in. And just to be there and to be a vessel in that way
Yeah.
is it's just a real blessing.
Mhm.
It amazes Karen and I to think of, I mean, I was 20, I was 19 when he asked me to direct the British Continentals, and by the time the tour came, I was 20. But the situations that we were in and the difficulty of, so many things like that and being so young. And it's just amazing to me that Cam trusted us, but that God empowered us,
Yes.
in spite of our age or lack of experience
So
or
I
whatever.
so wanted to be in the Continentals. I saw the 1983 spring tour with Jeff Moore, Dreamer,
Dreamer.
and my very close friend Jerry Price, who's been a Continental director and I think an encore director, discipled me before I was ever in Continentals,
Ah,
and he sort of helped me play trumpet, and I went to see him perform with Jeff Moore. It was in Springfield, Ohio, and I took this is the 80s. I took this huge Panasonic boombox with a cassette. I put it under my chair and I hit record, and I recorded the whole program, flipped the tape. Jim, I grew up on a farm, southwestern Ohio. I took that tape out in the barn with my trumpet, and I learned at least 90% of the program by ear and just played along. And I just played it, the Omardians opening, praise his name and see it happen. I think it was the Omardians who wrote that. But in any event, I was so wanting to be in the Continentals, and finally auditioned at Julia Winterberg's first tour, which was 84, I think.
yeah, I think that's right.
And so anyway, I know that we had neighbors a few farm fields away that probably heard me playing, and I didn't care. But it was great.
That's one of the best Continental stories I've ever heard, honestly.
It's like I went to Germany in '85, and then I went back in '90 when the wall was down. You know, because I think the wall went down in November of '89.
'89, yeah.
And just to come back and because that Berlin concert in '85 was so memorable because, you know, we had to keep it very quiet, and we met a contact just across the wall through the checkpoint who we were to follow on foot, walked some distance to a church, and all of the instruments were provided. We couldn't take our instruments. So it was the first time I ever played a valved trumpet rather than a keyed trumpet, you know, and that was the year we played that Christmas song at the end of the tour that had such fast runs. And
oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was this awful key, but you know, anyway, we got through it. But we talked to people after that concert who, there was one guy that said he traveled over 100 kilometers on his bicycle to see a gospel concert. And it's incredible. And you know, the tour in South America with World Vision and the Jesus Project combined, that was John Eric. First of all, to be under his leadership was fantastic. And then to see both the intense need of the gospel in Colombia, where we would show the Jesus film, and then to go to Brazil and see unbelievable poverty from the physical and spiritual. You know, you can't have those experiences and not be changed for the rest of your life. It's impossible.
Have you ever wished you could gift your life-changing Continental experience to someone else? Well, you can. Your monthly giving can make a huge impact for our teams all over the world. Did you know that this year, we'll have more than 20 Continental groups on the road, communicating in 7 different languages? The Continental story goes on, so keep writing your part of it by being on our support team. And our groups will say thank you in 7 different languages.